Hello and welcome to College Football Throwdown, episode 77. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Yes, this is College Football Throwdown, back after a short hiatus. We are a college football podcast by college football fans for college football fans. We've had a busy few weeks here, but we are here today to talk about the games of Nebraska football that have occurred in the past 3 weeks, as well as previewing the upcoming game day Ohio State game.
Right on. Exciting stuff. You might want to explain to people a little bit why we normally we try to have a podcast every week, but some unusual circumstances have been in our way.
Yep. Well, I've had some conventions and different events going on the weekend, and you've been traveling as well. You are no longer in Alaska, as you were last time we'd podcasted.
Correct. I'm no longer in Alaska, so had the opportunity of a lifetime to do one of those bucket list type of travel experiences, and so I had to regretfully say that the Huskers had to take a little bit of a back seat because frankly there wasn't even one sports bar / television on the cruise ship, and in one of the towns there were hardly any TVs. They just why would you want to sit and watch a football game when you're in Alaska? You need to be going out there and enjoying the beauty and the nature that's around you. So it's why would you even care that we didn't have a TV? They said, well, you clearly don't understand Nebraska fans.
Yeah, or you specifically.
Yeah. So anyway, I ended up having to watch some of this stuff with Gamecast and other phone related technology.
Right. Yep. But talking about we're going to talk about the Colorado game, which we gave predictions for in the previous podcast, and was the next game coming up from episode 76. But before we get into that, I believe you have the beverage for us this week.
I do, and I'm kind of excited about this. This is a great beverage that is from our home state of Michigan, from New Holland Brewing Company. It's called Dragon's Milk. It's an unusual beer in a couple of ways. Number one, it's a bourbon barrel aged beer, which makes it attractive to me from the very get-go because I love bourbon. But also it is a stout, and oftentimes a stout might be a beer that I would consider too heavy, but this one is one that actually pours and drinks very smoothly for a stout. I think it's just a wonderful combination, and then with the influence of the bourbon, it just makes for a very, very nice beer. And so it is a bottled beverage, though, so it might not be very distinctive in the noise, but we'll see what I can do here with my opener. Here we go. Hopefully you caught a little bit of that.
Yes, I did. Don't worry.
Okay, good. But anyway, I know we have a couple of regular listeners on the program who love the beer, and I've had a chance to communicate with a few of them, either by email or in person when I've met them. And this one I think is one that is a little more unique than we normally do. So, cheers to you, my son, with a little bit of bourbon barrel aged Dragon's Milk.
All right, the Dragon's Milk. That's just a good name too.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, it's good. Oh, it's good. Holy cow! Wow.
Oh man, you're making
Yes.
you're doing a good job with these ads. They got to start paying us for these.
No, that's a good beer.
All right.
I wouldn't be drinking too many of them, though. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that would be dangerous, huh?
Yep.
All right. So, yes, for this Nebraska-Colorado game, as I said, I was actually at a convention, but I was following the updates on my phone when I could.
Yes.
Yes. And actually, when we went to lunch, we went to a P.F. Chang's that was in the area, and they had the game right there on the TV for us.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. So I basically watched almost all of the third quarter. By which point we were in the lead, and in that quarter we maintained the lead, though there were some opportunities we had on offense, where our defense did a good job 3-and-out at them or stopped them, at midfield, and then we just got the ball and 3-and-out it and kicked it back, and so that was making me nervous. And then when I'm checking later on, it's the fourth quarter, I see, oh crap, They're gaining on us. They've tied us up. How did this happen?
Yeah.
So I did not go back and watch the meltdown after the fact, because we were up by 17 points at one point.
Right. And well, yeah, and that's my summary of it. I mean, basically, that was a game where we came out, played very well early in the game. Built a 17-point lead, but certainly seemed to be doing a good job. And our defense had done a very good job against Colorado's offense. It looked like we were clearly the better team. And then the second half, happens, and they get a big explosive play where they score from a long distance. I believe it was a pass play, right to begin the third quarter, and close that lead to 10. That gives them a little hope. That gives them some inspiration, and then it just kind of falls apart from there. We don't respond well. We don't do what we're supposed to do, and ultimately they come back, and tie the game, and then ultimately get us in the end in overtime. But the bottom line is we choked. Bottom line is, it was a Nebraska team that should have been able to take care of business in that situation. When you have a 17-point lead at halftime, you should be able to win that game, especially the way the defense had played in that first half. And that was another in a series of painful experiences that our team has had to go through as it learns how to win.
Right.
And there's quite a bit of debate about this whole concept of learning how to win, but that's clearly something we're struggling to do.
Right. Yep. And the final score ended up being 31-31 and 34-31 in overtime.
Right. Right.
And I remember at the time there were quite a number of fans who were mad at Scott for his play calling, especially in that overtime period.
Right.
Saying that he was calling things too conservative because Adrian hadn't been passing well in the game.
Right.
But there definitely were some fans that were not happy with him about that.
Yep, I would agree. And I think Scott learned a lot from that game. And I think that game showed me, or reminded me, that Scott is still a fairly young head coach in terms of his years as being a head coach. And he's going to have to go through some growing pains, some learning as well. And this whole early season has pointed to one of the other major factors. One of the reasons why there's been frustration among Nebraska fans, and you and I would be in that category, maybe less so people like AJ, who's been on the podcast a number of times, my brother, is that you tend to read about what's going on with the program over the summer and since the previous season, and it's also positive. And it's important. It's incumbent on the head coach to manage that expectation. And I think Scott has learned a very good lesson about how he needs to get in front of that and manage the expectations. Say positive things, make sure that he's giving positive reinforcement to his team and to his coaches, how he needs to do that, but also be making statements in the media that moderate the expectation, especially when there's so many unknowns about what you're doing. So it doesn't look like you are totally shocked and confused by how poorly we've played. You know what I mean? He had to have known that he had a young offensive line and that things were probably not going to go so great early in the season, and that we've still had a ways to go defensively. Mm-hmm. And yet these things show up. Nebraska fans aren't ready for them because we've been hearing about the off-season conditioning program and how much better everybody is, and blah blah blah. Well, that's the head coach's job to manage that expectation. And I think he'll learn that. But it was a lesson he had to learn.
Yep, that is definitely true. And on the previous podcast, we gave our predictions, as we usually do, for the games. We both predicted Nebraska victory. I predicted 38-35, while you predicted 42-38. So I guess I got a little bit... Oh, sorry?
Go ahead.
Well, so I guess I think I win that round because I picked lower scores, and I picked that the winner would win by 3 points. It ended up being the other way around, but
no, that's a weak argument, just so you know, because you know what, we both lost because we picked the wrong team to win. It doesn't matter that you picked the same margin of victory that actually occurred when the other team is the one that won. we both failed miserably on that. Although it is interesting that even though we both felt reasonably optimistic that we were the better team, and frankly, I think if Nebraska and Colorado played 10 times, we would win 6 or 7 or 8 of them. I mean, I still believe we're a better team than they are, top to bottom. But we were not as prepared as them. Scott and his immaturity and his staff's immaturity showed up in substantial fashion, in my opinion, in that game. And the fact that we continue to always have an Achilles heel. This year, it's our kicking game.
Mm-hmm. Right, which was an unexpected Achilles heel.
Right, but still, we always seem to have one. We just don't have enough depth. You should have at least 2 decent kickers.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
We only had 1.
Yes, that's what we've learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
The other game that we predicted that for the last podcast was the big game for week 2, LSU versus Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I predicted that LSU would win 28-21, while you predicted that Texas would win 21-17. And then
Right.
LSU ended up winning by quite a bit more than or by larger scores rather than we had imagined, 45-38 over Texas.
Yeah. It's a big win for LSU, especially since that was at Texas, correct?
Yes, it was. That's why you chose Texas.
Right. I know. And I thought that Texas, because of that home field, would rise to that occasion, but they didn't rise enough.
No, but keeping it within 7 points and showing that clearly their offense was scoring on a good LSU defense. So that's promising for them.
That's true.
Yep. But I win that round since I did get the right one.
Yes, you do.
So there.
Okay. For those keeping track at home.
That's
yes.
right. Yes. Get out your scorecards, fans.
Yes, exactly.
And then the following week, we played against Northern Illinois in Lincoln at a game that you happened to be there to attend. I heard.
Yes, that was.
Yeah, I heard that the atmosphere at the stadium was really cool, and they did some cool things there to get everyone hyped up.
They did, and the energy for a team coming off of a very disappointing, just a crushing loss the previous week against Colorado. I was very impressed that both the fans and the team both seemed to have quite a bit of fire and energy and remained optimistic even in the face of that very bitterly disappointing defeat the previous week. Sometimes there can be a hangover. I didn't really sense that with Nebraska's team. And as it turns out, we'll get into this more later in the podcast, but that Northern Illinois team came in and immediately threw some wrenches at our offense because their defense came out in a 3-3 stack defense that they had never shown before in their previous games or in past years. And so, our young offensive line was forced to adjust on the fly to a schematic and a slanting defensive line and blitzing linebackers that they had not prepared for at all. And so it caused for a little bit of a slow start, but we ultimately put together a pretty decent 4 quarters of football in that game against Northern Illinois.
I would say so. And that score ended up being 44-8 in Nebraska's favor, with the defense putting on an admirable performance and keeping them to so many 3-and-outs and forcing them to kick field goals and things of that nature.
Exactly. Yep. And the defense played, I think, particularly well. Now, part of that is maybe Northern Illinois' offense wasn't good, and so we'll certainly figure that out as the season progresses. Although I think the defense has clearly shown enough already to indicate that against the run, they have definitely improved. And against the pass, I think it's still the jury's still out on whether or not we can defend the pass, because there's still way too many wide open receivers going any which way, and we are still being forced to blitz to get pressure almost every time. We can't just line up in a 3-4 and get pressure with 3 guys or even 4. It seems like we have to bring 5 to really get some heat on a quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this was a game. I think I started watching the video feed, and then I had a movie to go to, so I listened to it on the radio on the way there. and then came out of the movie and saw the final score. So glad that this one came together well. I noticed that I think we only had like two penalties the whole game, which I thought was a sign of growth. You know, that we had ourselves together
Yes.
mentally. Didn't quite turn out that way for the following week, but we'll get to that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so Northern Illinois is an indication of kind of progress and that we can put together a decent 4 quarters of football. But now it's about, can we consistently do that? And by the way, I need to mention one thing. Maybe you ought to mention to those who might be listening on the podcast what you do for a living. So when you say, I had to go to a movie, a Husker fan's going to listen to that and they're going to roll their eyes and say, this guy's not a legitimate fan. You need to explain that this is your job, that you are in the movie business. And so, attending movies and being familiar with what's going on is kind of part of your gig, right?
That's right. I'm an associate producer at a small post production company here in Los Angeles. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so, yes, I do like to see different movies, figure out what's going on right now. There was a new trailer for Frozen today that was released. On the
Uh-huh.
topic,
Okay.
I watched that at the color session I was at today for one of our shows. So
I got it.
there you go.
See, so that's good. So that maybe then people can say, oh, okay, I get it. He's not just some goofball that's going to a movie instead of watching a Nebraska game. Right?
That's
So,
right. Yeah, because we know
okay.
you wouldn't stand for that.
No, I would be like, what's wrong with you? So,
I was gonna say, I think looking kind of as how the season has progressed, you can kind of see that Northern Illinois game as an important game, like you said, for us to kind of get our bearings back after a tough loss on the road to Colorado, come home, have this nice atmosphere, and Adrian kind of got to get himself a little bit more comfortable. Obviously, throwing the ball better that game, putting together 44 points for the team and everything. So I think that helped him get more situated. So then when we encountered difficulties on the road again the following week against Illinois, we didn't crumble, but instead managed to keep our composure and eventually take the lead back.
yes, exactly, exactly. And if that is our transition into the Illinois game, there's just a few things I would want to mention about that. I mean, most people who are listening to this podcast, if they're Husker fans, they've obviously watched the game. They know what's going on, and I think there's like six big things, six big takeaways from this game, and they're not all positive, but some of them are. So I'm gonna go through them. But one is the mental toughness thing that you were just talking about. I think that the adversity that we had to overcome in this, even though it was self-inflicted to some extent, but you got to give a little credit to Illinois. Some of those fumbles were earned fumbles. I mean, Illinois caused them, right? Illinois was doing an absolutely fabulous job of hammering the ball, putting the helmet on the ball, stripping. They were doing everything they could. They clearly came into this game with a strategy that they believed Nebraska was potentially susceptible to turnovers, because we'd already shown ourselves to be a little bit turnover prone in our previous games, right? Against Northern Illinois, against Colorado, against South Alabama. We hadn't been clean in any of those games in terms of turnovers. So Illinois obviously recognized that, and Lovie Smith and his defensive staff had made that a priority. And they were physical. Oh my gosh, this was a physical team. It was a very physical game. But you know what? I think one of the positives came out of that is that I believe Adrian Martinez gets better as the game progresses on some part, because some people just need to get hit a few times. I can recall even myself when I was in high school, I liked and generally tended to play better and feel more in the flow of the game after I had been hit a few times. Or hit somebody else. You needed to have that contact before you kind of settled into the whole collision aspect of the sport. And I feel like I saw an Adrian Martinez in the second half of the game against Illinois that I haven't seen all season. I saw somebody who was running hard and decisively and aggressively, and not running not to get hurt. I feel like some of his early runs we often have at the beginning of games, the first couple of times he runs, he's out there prancing around, and then falls down almost the first time he's touched. And it's almost like he's just trying to protect himself.
Mm-hmm.
But then as he gets deeper into the game, that kind of goes away, and then his competitive instinct just kind of takes over, and all of a sudden he's a different player. And somehow we got to figure out how to get him with that switch going on immediately, not having to wait so long.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, to add to that, in earlier games, when he had run, I kind of thought that he looked kind of slow, and I was almost wondering if he'd like put on some extra. I mean, he has bulked up definitely over the off season, but I was wondering if that
Yes.
was like negatively impacting his speed, maybe. But in
Oh,
this,
I think so.
but right, but then in this game, he had 18 rushes for 118 yards, definitely his
Mm-hmm.
best numbers of the season so far.
Yes.
So he definitely upped his game in that regard this time around.
I would agree. He ran really, really well, particularly in the second half. He still has to improve his ability on his zone read game. Now, again, it's hard to measure a zone read game without rewatching the tape a few times, and I haven't had that opportunity. But because every time you see that mesh between the running back and the quarterback, you can't presume that there's actually a read going on. Sometimes it's a called play. This is a handoff. You're giving it to this guy, and that's the play, right? And that's the way they're blocking it. Other times they're actually running it as an option where they're optioning off of a read that the quarterback's supposed to make about a defensive lineman or a linebacker or whatever, depending on the formation. But the bottom line is that it looked to me like he was not always making the right read. Like he would give the ball to the running back, and the running back would just get drilled by two or three guys immediately.
Mm-hmm.
In the backfield, right? And it's like, well, maybe if you had kept the ball on that play, Adrian, you might have been able to at least get back to the line of scrimmage, but you didn't. And so I think there's still some learning going on. I mean, people need to remember he's just a sophomore, and he's still learning, and he's still trying to figure it out himself. And I'm sure he's also being told that he is supposed to protect his body, that the coaches are telling him, listen, we want you to run, but we need you to run smart. And sometimes when you tell a player who's instinctively a competitor to run smart, he doesn't quite know how to do that, right? He just knows how to run. And at some point, the coaches just need to, pull the leash off of that and say, don't worry about running smart. Just run. Just
Mm-hmm.
play. Just play, and we'll worry about whatever the result is. If you end up getting hurt because we run you too much or because you run too aggressively and you get yourself hurt, well, I guess we're just going to have to deal with it because we need that Adrian. We don't need the Adrian that's all prancy foot, dancing around.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say was the second half, our offense looked as good as I've seen all season. I mean, we had consecutive drives, not just big plays, but consecutive drives in which we had a series of plays, good plays, positive plays, but passing plays, running plays, quick. We had our pace way faster, right? More running, more short passes. I've been very irritated so far this season with Scott's propensity to have a second and short to second and medium, and he invariably calls a play in which Adrian is throwing the ball down the field 20 plus yards. And the problem with that is that you do that, and the chances of completing what I would consider an intermediate to long pass is going to be somewhere between 25 and 35%. So if you're executing it at a good level, you're only going to get 1 out of 4 of those. Okay. And the number of those times was more important than getting 25 yards was getting a first down. And we're not good enough at running the football that coming back with a 3rd and 4 or a 3rd and 5 instead of, a 3rd and 2 or a first down because you threw a short pass for 7 yards and got your 5, on that 2nd and 5. So it was just all about managing the moving of the chains. And I think that's something that Scott needs to work on. And it seemed like in the second half of this Illinois game, the way he was calling plays or how Adrian was checking down to, maybe a secondary pass receiver, we were getting those shorter kind of plays. and giving ourselves a little bit better chance to keep moving those chains. And we looked good. I mean, at some points looked fabulous in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now let's put that together, right? Let's put that together.
Right. Yeah. Now and this was another game where all these late games are going on. It was like 7 o'clock Central Time, so 5 o'clock my time out here, and I got stuff going on, so I couldn't watch the game. But I was able to listen to this one all the way through, basically on the radio, or through an app on my phone that had the radio broadcast anyway.
Right.
And I remember there were several times that the announcers made the same observation you did of, oh, Adrian should have kept it there and gone inside instead of trying to give it to the running back outside, or vice versa. Basically like he kind of made the wrong read that time.
Right.
So that was definitely kind of a theme that got picked up on. And I recall specifically, I believe it was in the Northern Illinois game, because I remember now, I watched through the whole first half of that game. And we put together a drive like right before halftime. We only had a little bit of time left on the clock, like a minute or so. And we put together a nice
50 some seconds.
Right. Yep. We put together a nice drive where we went a full 80 yards down the field and scored.
Yes.
Rather than just getting the big plays where Maurice Washington, makes a guy miss and goes for 80 yards for a touchdown, which is great. But showing that consistency of like, okay, we could put together a solid drive of 8 or 10 plays at least, that gets us all the way down the field. That shows a level of consistency to me, and getting that repetition in place, that's something that we can keep going back to throughout the season. And then if you're able to do that against good defenses, the big plays will come, as you pound them and the defense gets tired. Eventually they miss one of those tackles and then you're gone for the 80-yard play. Right,
exactly. Because you never quite feel as confident that you can duplicate that big play, right? Like if you're relying only on those plays, those are much more inconsistent in terms of when they show up and when they happen than if you're able to consistently, do a lot of 6 and 12-yard gains and 18-yard gains that just chunk you down the field and then get you into scoring position, so I agree with you. It's all about consistency,
right,
and being able to do that with more regularity and with a little bit more control.
Right. Now, and I'm going to read you some stats here. So in terms of total yards, we had 674 yards to their 299. And I'm pretty sure we were actually over 700 before we took the knees at the end of the game, which lost us some yards.
Correct.
And then, so if you're looking at that off the bat, well, we've more than doubled them in yardage. So we must have won by a lot, right? But the final score is 42-38. And and the stat that really shows the difference there is that we had 5 turnovers to their 2, and we had 11 penalties in total. So
right. And we had 32 or 34 first downs, and they had 14 or something like that, and they were 1 for 12 on third down. I mean, there are stats that if you just ran down the stat sheet and didn't look at the score, you would assume that the one team won the game by a comfortable margin, unless you looked at the turnovers. And then you're like, okay, that was the equalizer right there. And so, and again, you got to give credit to Illinois. I mean, that was a very physical game. They beat the hell out of our receivers. I'm very concerned about that. In fact, as we talk about next week here in a little bit, because our wide receivers as a group are not a big group, not a big bulky group. They're all relatively small. They're 5'10" to 6 feet tall, and they're not big in their stature physically. And those guys are tough as nails, though. But they took a beating against Illinois' defensive secondary. I mean, those guys hit, and they hit like a ton of bricks. And here's another thing that I'm just going to mention here, plant the seed, because I have a feeling based on last year, and well, not just last year, but previous years since we've joined the Big Ten, it appears that the refereeing in the Big Ten hasn't gotten any better. The refs are still awful. And in this case, again, I could point out awful mistakes made that hurt both teams, but particularly a couple of plays that were particularly painful for us to see. And if you watched any other games in the Big Ten, one that I wanted to mention briefly here in a little bit was Wisconsin, Michigan. There were some atrocious calls in that game too. So the whole bad referees are in the Big Ten. That's still with us. The other thing I would say is kicking game is going to kill us. It's going to kill us. You cannot be as bad as we are in 1/3 of the football game. There's offense, defense, and kicking game. That's what Tom used to always say. He didn't call it special teams. He called it kicking game. And I'm telling you, we suck. And we've got to get better if we hope to be a consistent winner. And that's going to make us a 6-6 football team if we don't get that fixed.
Yep. Yeah, well, especially in situations where you're in reasonable field goal range, but you feel like you have to go for it on 4th down because it's a 50-50 if your guy's going to make it or worse.
Right. Oh, you mean when it's 4th and 11, you go for it like we did?
Yeah, like that. So yeah, though I totally agree with you, and I know the whole Barrett Pickering situation is under lockdown, but it sounds like he probably won't be back anytime soon, so we're kind of stuck with the guys we got. So
right,
we just got to make them better. One bit I just remembered, I saw this posted online today. I think it was Dietrich Mills on like his Instagram or Twitter or something. It was like a post where basically I don't think he posted it. I think one of the media guys posted it, but basically it was a picture of him holding a football, and I guess he's like holding on to this football all week, and he's saying like anybody's free to come and try to take it from me, as something to try to get his fumbling situation in order.
Exactly. Yep. And he made the suggestion. Coaches didn't ask him to do it. He said, I want to do this because I am not a fumbler and I'm going to prove it. And he thought this would be a good thing to do. So, yep, he showed up at the press conference with football in his arms, and he's going to do that. And if nothing else, it's just going to be for him to increase the awareness thing.
Yeah, no, and it's nice, even if it's more of a formality than like, something that's going to genuinely teach him like proper football holding discipline, because of course there's a big difference between holding it as you're going between classes and when a guy's barreling down on you trying to rip it out of your hands in the heat of a football game. But like you say, it shows initiative from him that he knows it's a problem that he's got to fix. So hopefully we see improvement on that against our upcoming opponent, Ohio State.
Yes, it has finally arrived. It's a game that certainly Nebraska fans have circled going into the season based on how Ohio State had struggled at times last year, particularly defensively, and knowing that they had a transition going on at quarterback and they had lost a number of other key players, wide receivers and such. And they, I think they have like 3 or 4 new offensive linemen and a new coach. So you add all that up and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a transition year for Ohio State. They're going to be good, but not great. But lo and behold, they're looking like they are absolutely, legitimately the team to beat in the Big Ten and a likely, college football playoff participant.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at their schedule, they haven't played anybody of real significance yet. I think the closest they've got is Indiana. But every team that they've played, they've beaten soundly, like 40 points plus.
Exactly. And they did, even the Indiana match was diminished somewhat because the quarterback that they thought they were going to face against Indiana ended up not being able to play. So Indiana's best quarterback was unavailable for that game. So that made that Indiana game a little easier for them. But you're right. They are somewhat untested in that they haven't faced the best of teams, but they're facing a Nebraska team that has shown itself to be a very inconsistent and incomplete football team. So I don't know that we're necessarily can beat our chests and say, well, they haven't seen anybody like us, kind of thing. You know what I mean? I don't feel that level of confidence like I might have in other years back in the day.
No, definitely not. And that while I have hopes that our defense will show the aggressiveness that we've seen earlier in the season, and we'll be able to get some nice stops or maybe even cause a fumble or get some sacks, things like that. In general, we know that their offensive line is going to be way more physical than anyone else we faced this year. And so they are definitely going to score on us plenty. So the onus is really on Adrian and the offense to put together a response in return and keep it close.
Correct. Exactly. And then hope that with a little bit of luck and a few bounces of the ball in a stadium that's going to be very pro Nebraska, that they could carry some positive momentum into a tight battle and maybe put a little pressure on Ohio State where they might be potentially could tighten up a little bit. Right, first time they're in that situation, first time they're in a close battle in the fourth quarter of a game, all of a sudden maybe some guys behave a little differently. Our guys are relaxed and making plays because we're playing at home in front of a very supportive crowd, and their guys are maybe not so relaxed and dropping a ball here or there and that sort of stuff that opens the door for us to sneak one in. I mean, that's really what has to happen. We have to play our best game of the year, our best game period, and they have to give us a little help.
Yep, I would agree with that. It's a game that could definitely, and I feel like I say this most years when we play Ohio State or Wisconsin or some of the better teams in the Big Ten. I feel like we could make it close, into the fourth quarter and maybe be able to edge out something, or it's going to be a blowout and it's going to be rough. It seems like those are the two ways it tends to go.
You're right, and I find myself picking something in between there because I'd like to think that we're less susceptible to the kind of lay down blowout that we've experienced in past years. But certainly that's still a very much a real possibility, especially if things don't go well early for us, because we do not have the ability to come back against a team like Ohio State if we dig ourselves a hole like we did at Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I was just reminded of, I'm looking here online, and this, where am I at right now? Uh, NCAA FB, so I'm not exactly sure what this website is, but it's
Okay.
got the spread of the game as 16.5 plus for Ohio State.
Right.
In terms of the spread, but it was reminding me looking at it that we came close to beating them last year. That
Yes,
was
we did.
that was actually one of the highlights of the year in terms of being close with a really good team. So
Right.
they probably remember that and are looking to make a statement this time around.
Exactly. We're not going to sneak up on them this year. And yeah, last year was a game in which, frankly, they weren't playing nearly as good of football last year at that time of the season as they are now. Right? They're a far more confident team. Their defense is playing at a way higher level than it was last year. Last year, their defense wasn't very good. They were really struggling to keep people from scoring. This year, the points are going to come a lot harder for Scott Frost and the Nebraska offense. And so again, we need to play our best game and then a little something. And they need to give us a little help. If those things happen, then we can make it interesting. But as I now look at this upcoming game, both you and I identified this game as a loss before the season began. So it's not a shocker to look at this situation and say, well, Ohio State's likely to win this game. But the nice thing is that even though we made the mistake out in Colorado and lost a game we shouldn't have lost, as things played out, we got what we were hoping for, which was the attention of the college football world as best you can get it by having game day from ESPN choose this game for its site for this week. So what does that mean? having game day in Lincoln. Well, it's been 12 years since it's been there, so it's been a huge drought since the last time we had a game day come to Lincoln. And we can kind of thank the fact that this week's slate of games is really what made that possible. It's not a very good week of college football. There's not a lot of great matchups, or the great matchups that do exist are between teams that already have had a game day or recently had one, like the Notre Dame game this week is a really good matchup, but they were just at Georgia Notre Dame last week. So they wouldn't want to feature Notre Dame 2 weeks in a row, right? So that was off the list. And then there's a couple of good games out west, particularly the Washington versus USC game, which now you look at it and you see all the teams in the Pac-12 that seem to have found at least one loss on their loss column already. This USC Washington game now looms pretty big for defining the leader, if you will, of the Pac-12 early this season. That's becomes a big game, and they could have picked that. And so it's a bit of a tip of the cap to Nebraska and a recognition by ESPN that, hey, this game day is going to be a big deal in Lincoln. Lincoln's going to show off an incredible college football environment for them to showcase, because the people in Lincoln are so ready for this to happen. I mean, it is an event. The Pinnacle Bank Arena is sold out for the first practice of the basketball team. I mean, it is going to be a rocking weekend in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I see what you're saying. I would say that there was some hype for us, in terms of our chances of winning our division in the Big Ten, and maybe even, contending for the whole thing. And we're ranked, in the top 25 at the start of the season. And I think that got disillusioned pretty quick once they saw us lose to Colorado and all that. So I think some of that hype has died down, seeing how we've kind of struggled here in these early games. But like you say, the Colorado game is out of conference, so we still, in terms of our conference hopes, those are still wide open for us. So this, if we can somehow make it close, if we could somehow make the upset happen, it would be a game day to remember for sure.
Absolutely. Well, and and you know what? Win or lose, this is a huge weekend for Nebraska athletics. Huge for recruiting, not just for Nebraska football, but for Nebraska basketball, Nebraska volleyball, Nebraska women's basketball. I mean, you name the sport, this is a big weekend. Every sport that's doing recruiting has been focused on this weekend for quite some time, and we're going to probably have somewhere between 8 and 10, official visitors this weekend for this game. So we've loaded up. You only get 56 official visits a year, and we're going to use about 10 of them this game. So that's a pretty big chunk, right? And so they recognize that win or lose, we want to show the country that this is big time. This is big time athletics at Nebraska. They have a level of support within their athletic programs that speaks volumes to the passion of the fan base, and the fact that they do have an expectation, and they will support their sports, right? So that's all great stuff for the university. And there's probably a couple of other things. There's all kinds of speculation going on there. One of the worst kept secrets is that Nebraska is soon to announce some kind of a new facility that's coming here in the next probably 6 months, where there's going to be an announcement of a new football facility, because we are now one of the oldest football facilities in the Big Ten, and we have loads of money. We have a bit of a chest already built up. We have no debt. We're servicing no debt as an athletic department right now, which is very unique among athletic departments. And so there has been speculation that it was going to be announced. It was going to be announced. They keep thinking it's going to be announced, and there's a chance that maybe it'll be announced this weekend. This would be an ideal time for them to be able to make such an announcement, right? In the midst of all these recruits being there and everything, that, hey, you guys come in here and you're going to be able to reap the benefits of this great new facility that'll open in 2 years. You know, so I just think there's a lot of positive things, regardless of whether the game ends up being a victory or not for us. I think we just need to come out and play well, and if it translates to a victory, that's just phenomenal. But if it doesn't, that doesn't mean our season's over or that we're not on schedule, because we still kind of are on schedule.
Yep, I totally agree. So, what is your score prediction for the Ohio State game?
Okay, I am. I believe we're not there yet. Again, I've had to adjust from my preseason optimism uh, uh, because, again, my criticism of Scott Frost, he didn't manage expectations. My expectation was too high, and now I have had to adjust it. I believe we lose this game. Probably, I'm of the opinion that we'll be able to score a few points on Ohio State's defense. They'll make a mistake here or there, whatever, give us a few short fields, and hopefully we'll be able to keep it close. And then maybe they end up scoring late to make it 42-21 Ohio State. So they end up winning by 21 points, but maybe it's a 7 to 14 point game for most of the game, and then Ohio State pulls away late. That would be my kind of reasonable expectation for this game.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
Hey, and I would want to say one more thing.
Okay.
What I will say about all this is that the following week, win or lose, the following week, Northwestern looms large as a huge game in Lincoln the following week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one we have to win.
Yeah.
We can't let Ohio State beat us twice.
Right, right. We can't get. I mean, and I do think you made a good point that Illinois was physical with us, and there's no doubt that Ohio State will be physical with us too. So hopefully we aren't licking our wounds too bad that we come into that Northwestern game battered and bruised, as it were.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So, what are your thoughts, buddy? What do you think Nebraska's capable of this weekend?
All right. I think I'm going to predict a little bit higher scoring. I'm going to say Ohio State gets 49 on us. Well, yeah, and let's say that we get 28. So
you're giving us the same 21 points, but just one score each more than me.
Yeah, actually, well, I was going to change that to 32 or 31 maybe, give us like 3 more. But then I was like, wait, are we really going to score a field goal? So
no, we're not.
So I changed that mind. So yeah, we'll go for 49-28. Yeah, I like, kind of like you. I think we'll keep it close. I actually predict it might be where we go down early to Ohio State, maybe badly, and then we manage to regroup and score some points later on. Get it closer. But in the end, the lead is too big and they pull through. But kind of like how you mentioned, Adrian playing better after he's gotten hit a little bit. I think we might pull something together more in the second half of the game.
Right. I see. Well, that's been more accurate to our MO. So what you're describing is how that game plays out is probably more accurate than if you base it on history. But I would say the alternative to that would be that they blow us out early and it never is close. And it's kind of an embarrassing score. It's a 55-10 type of thing, where we're really not in the game after the midway through the second quarter. It's a foregone conclusion who's going to. But I'm hopeful that that's not the case. I'm hopeful that our defense is got enough oomph to it that we can keep those guys from just racing up and down the field on us. Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, because we did it last year, their offense with an NFL quarterback that they had last year and great players and a more mature offensive line than this one, and a set of wide receivers that was more mature than this one they have now, you'd think that we should be able to play pretty decent, right? Because our defense has definitely improved over what it was a year ago. But yet you look at how they're playing. I think the coaches and the players at Ohio State, they are a better football team than they were last year across the board. And so that's why you can't compare year to year. That's why those kinds of comparison score things never work.
That's right. And speaking of embarrassing losses, as you're discussing, there's one more game we need to discuss, which is the
Okay.
Michigan-Wisconsin game that
Oh
happened
yeah.
this past weekend, which
Yes.
we both watched since it was of importance to the Big Ten.
Big
Um,
Ten. Yes.
and the final score was 35-14, but that score does not indicate how much Wisconsin dominated the game. In fact, I stopped watching after the first half because it was clear to me that Michigan wasn't getting it done.
Right. And that was it was as about as one-sided and dominant of a victory as Michigan has taken since last year's Ohio State game. Remember the beatdown they took on that game. But here's the difference. Last year they took that Ohio State beatdown and they had a great defense at that time, which made that Ohio State game at the end of the year that much more impressive. But you look at this game with Wisconsin this past weekend, and here's the thing that blew me away. I was absolutely shocked by what I was witnessing. So I saw some notes being shared on the internet, and I so I had to go look for it myself. And you know, I, I just don't know how a team that has had a top 5 recruiting class 3 of the last 4 years, and they had a top 20 recruiting class the 4th year. So their last 4 recruiting classes have all been top 10 on average, and they don't have any defensive line. Their defensive line that they put out there against, Ohio, Wisconsin's traditional monstrous offensive line was a defensive line that composed of a 280-pound kid, a 260-pound kid, and a 260-pound kid. I mean, they had no chance against those 320 to 340-pound Wisconsin offensive linemen. Wisconsin, on one of the early drives, had substituted in linemen. They had effectively 8 offensive linemen on the team on the field one time for a power play right near the goal line. They just literally overwhelmed Michigan with just sheer power, and Michigan didn't have a defensive line to handle it. Between departures early for the NFL and transfers out of the program, Michigan got caught with no talent, no properly developed talent for defensive line. They had some injuries and such, and they found themselves playing 260-pound nose guard against the interior offensive line of Wisconsin.
Yeah, that one definitely is a head scratcher, considering that they've been able to get so many recruits that they wanted, and that they're in the Big Ten, which is a conference where you need some powerful linemen to be able to get
Right.
through the tough parts of the year and these physical teams.
Right.
And it's worth noting that Wisconsin's big star, Jonathan Taylor, was hurt for a good portion of the game. But even
Right.
without him, they were still able to get these big runs
Oh yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
consistently.
You hardly noticed he was gone because they were dominating with whoever was getting the Brock. So now the question is, what does Michigan do, right? Because if they, I know they have some guys injured that might come back, but if the defensive lineman that they had to roll with this week in that game continue to be the defensive lineman that they put out there, I guarantee you, a number of teams are going to watch this film and say, okay, now we know the formula for how we can compete with Michigan, even though we don't have the talent, roster spot 1 to 85 that they do. We can beat them because they have this glaring weakness. It's a little bit like us in our kicking game. Now everybody knows Nebraska's not going to be kicking field goals. Their kickoff return is going to be a heyday for Ohio State and every team that plays us until we prove that we can kick the ball off and get it out of the end zone. Because right now we're kicking line drives and we're going to have kickoff returns against us like you wouldn't believe until we get that fixed.
Yeah.
And Michigan's in the same boat. They have a weakness that everybody knows about now.
Yep. Well, it's interesting. I was just looking at their schedule. They've got a tough team basically every other week going forward here. Like next week
Yep.
they play Rutgers, which they should win, but then they play Iowa, and then 2 weeks later they play Penn State. The week after that it's Notre Dame. 2 weeks after that,
Right.
Michigan State. 2 weeks after that, Ohio State. So they don't got
So
a
well,
cupcake
between
schedule.
between Rutgers and Iowa and a bye week,
Yeah.
they already have. So they get a second bye week.
Um, I
Because
mean,
they already had a bye week before the Wisconsin game. So
right.
somehow they got 2 bye weeks. So that means
Their other bye week. It looks like it's between their Maryland game and the Michigan State game.
Okay.
Sorry, I skipped over like in between Iowa and Penn State. They play Illinois, the team we just played.
Okay. Well, I tell you what. Even an Illinois team, which they'll beat, but if Illinois is anything like the team that we played, it's going to be a physical game, and they're going to get beat up. And if they don't have any answer on that defensive line, things could get interesting. Things could get very interesting for Michigan this year, because with all the talent they have a fundamental weakness. So they need some time to get themselves organized. And I'm sure that, Harbaugh is going to absolutely go nuts with them this week. Northwestern, who got beat pretty soundly by Michigan State this week, also is a team that's you're going to see a big change in them, or they're going to be in deep trouble. I mean, their coach basically put their team on notice after that game. So he basically said, "I've gotten to know my team and I don't like them." That's basically what he said in a nutshell. And his answer was, "I'm going to introduce them to my number 12 Under Armour shoe. And that's all I know how to do." So he's going to kick them in the ass this week. And we might see a very different Northwestern team after this week. So, sometimes that's all you got left, right? You got what you got. Now all you can do is drive the cattle to the end of the range. So,
that's right. Good Nebraska analogy there. I like it.
So,
all right, cool. Well, this, I think, is where we'll wrap up this episode 77 of College Football Throwdown. Obviously, big game coming up next week with game day and all the excitement. So, like you say, no matter how the game actually goes in terms of win and loss, hopefully it's an exciting week for Nebraska athletics in general, and there's some positivity coming out of the program and the perception of us nationally and all that coming out of this weekend. So
exactly.
Yep. So if all you fans out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us online if you search for College Football Throwdown. We're on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. You can find us online at podomatic.com. So there's plenty of places to find us. You can leave us a review on iTunes, or you can leave a comment on footballthrowdown.podomatic.com. We always like hearing back from the fans. So I thank you all out there for listening, and thank you for hosting with me, Dad. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.